So just finished watching another episode of Friday Night SmackDown, and I think the question on everybody's mind coming out of that episode was it the right call to have the Bloodlines, Jacob Fatu and Tama Tonga, defeat DIY for the tag team champions? I know in recent videos and recent weeks, especially on the podcast, I've been singing the praises of Jacob Fatu. I think he's a tremendous talent. I think the level of ferocity and just the extra layer that he brings to the bloodline has been fantastic. I'm a big fan of his and what they've been doing with that aspect of the bloodline. But granted, I think when it was announced, or rather when the bloodline had won that number one contenders gauntlet match, I think the intention, rather, I think everyone's expectation was that the bloodline would challenge DIY for the tag titles, and ultimately it would result in some kind of screwy finish. I think a lot of people anticipated the return of Jimmy Uso, kind of setting in motion what would occur at SummerSlam. And now obviously we know that the matchup between Solo Sikoa and Cody Rhodes will be a Bloodlines rules matchup. I think that's where we're going to be seeing the return of Paul Heyman, Jimmy Uso, and ultimately the original tribal chief, Roman Reigns. But that wasn't announced until the beginning of SmackDown. With that being said, that kind of eliminated the possibility of interference of Jimmy Uso. Of course, it was still a possibility, but because of the advertising of the Bloodline Rules match, it kind of decreases the expectation of it. I love DIY. I'm a big fan of Gargano and Ciampa. Their work in NXT, whether it was as a tag team or as a singles competitors, when they were feuding for the main event spot, and essentially all those matches that they had running into the pandemic, they for me really were a huge part of that NXT black and gold era. When you look back with the guys like the Undisputed Era, Johnny Gargano, Tommaso Ciampa, that core, really, Aleister Black, Andrade, I could keep going on. That core really defined an era for NXT. So to see them finally win the tag team titles on Friday Night SmackDown a few weeks ago, it was an awesome moment for fans of those NXT days, fans of DIY, fans of Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa. So when I saw that this matchup was going to be scheduled, again, a big part of me was thinking it's super soon for DIY to lose their tag team titles. They had just won them. They won the titles. Then they had a title defense against Grayson Waller and Austin Theory that resulted in an attack by the Bloodline, the very same individuals who would unseat them as champions. So a big part of me thought, okay, I don't think they're going to win clean, just because of the way we've been building the Bloodline and their matchup, the story with Cody Rhodes, rather. So I'm thinking, okay, some kind of interference via Jimmy Uso. And then we get to the beginning of the match when DIY is making their entrance. Tommaso Ciampa cuts a promo and throws it to Johnny Gargano, who's there with Candice LeRae, Indy Hartwell, and obviously Quill, his son. And I thought that was a really nice touch. It really allowed us as audience members to invest in Johnny Gargano. We wanted them to win. It's in Cleveland, his hometown. He talked about the 1996 edition of SummerSlam that he visited as a fan, and now all these years later, full circle, he is a WWE superstar, WWE Tag Team Champion, defending the gold in his hometown. Everything's pointing towards his way. But if there's one thing that WWE has done, certainly in the last, quarter century, is having their baby faces lose in their hometowns. Now, recent memory shows that they've been more receptive to having the babyface win, but there's something about seeing a champion, a hero, fall in front of their hometown. I understand that in the grand scheme of things, this will help DIY, because this garners sympathy for them. As a fan of theirs, we feel bad. We want to see these guys succeed. We want to see these guys on top. So to have him lose in the fashion that they did, via bloodline interference, once again, Solo Sikoa with the spike, nothing new, right? In the long run, it's gonna garner them more sympathy. But in the moment right now, it sucks, for lack of a better phrase. Especially when you look at that portion of the audience who, number one, there are fans of Johnny Gargano because it's Cleveland, but also, as I mentioned, that portion of the audience that grew up essentially with DIY. This is a storyline that's been going on since like 2016. When you look at the Cruiserweight Classic, that matchup between Gargano and Ciampa, and then leading to the formation of DIY, the tag team title runs that they had against the Authors of Pain, against the Revival, now known as FTR and AEW, of course, to their feud against one another. And now it's like they didn't. It basically nullifies them winning the championships a few weeks ago. It was a great moment again. If you haven't seen my reaction to that, please check out in the archives my reaction to DIY finally winning the tag team championships. In that moment, it felt so cool. It was awesome. It was great because especially from Gargano. We know Ciampa's a fan, of course, but a lot of people associate with Gargano because he's so openly about how he grew up as a pro wrestling fan, how he grew up as this like overweight little kid who loved Shawn Michaels, and part of me resonates with that. So to see him win those tag titles, it was so cathartic. It was very therapeutic. It was cool. I I'm always willing to follow and trust the process. Did the Bloodline need these tag titles? That could be argued. I think, in the sense of building up momentum, their storyline right now is the hottest on SmackDown. So it makes sense to provide them the tag titles. Plus, it gives them a little bit of momentum going into SummerSlam, the main event, Cody Rhodes defending his title against Solo Sikoa. My only issue is, how long is this title reign going to last? If this is just a flash in the pan, just a hot shot the title to the Bloodline, and they lose it literally in a month, then I'm going to look at it like, what are we doing? But if they hold the titles for a lengthy amount of time, let's say 3 months, okay, sure, I can get with that. Again, because the Bloodline story, it's the hottest thing on SmackDown. So you want to associate the titles with that. You have the WWE title and you have the tag team titles associated with this storyline. But what to watch out for is DIY now. Where does this leave them? They just won the tag titles. Are they going to get I'm assuming they're going to get a rematch, especially because of the way it ended with the interference by Solo Sikoa. And it's interesting to see where we go, because on one hand, do we give them another loss, basically sending them to the back of the line? Then where do we go from there? Or do they win it back? Because if you remember, a couple years ago, when the iteration of the Bloodline that we're all familiar with, the Usos, Roman, Solo Sikoa, Sami Zayn, there was a time when Solo was called up to the roster and he won the North American Championship for, I believe, maybe a week, maybe two, but I think it might have been like a week and a half. And it gave us this image of everyone holding the gold. I don't mean that we're going to see Solo win the championship. I don't think he's going to win. I have Cody as my prediction to win. But it's just a moment in time to provide Jacob and Tama these tag title reigns. It is very much a possibility that these titles just go right back to DIY. Do I think that's wise? No, I don't. I'm not a fan of like hot shining the titles and having them flip flop just for the sake of it. But sometimes in pro wrestling, they do tend to do that, where they just, crown a new champion just to create this moment. And it's a double edged sword, because there are portions of the audience who enjoy long reigns, long, meaningful tag team reigns, or title reigns for that matter. But then there's also that portion of the audience who likes a surprise, likes to be caught off guard with a title change just on the television show, SmackDown, Raw, NXT, and not on a major event like a SummerSlam. But one thing that WWE has been really incorporating in the last year and a half are these go-home shows, whether it's SmackDown or Raw, to have meaningful matches, whether it's a tag team title match. We saw two of those on this episode of SmackDown, with the women's tag and obviously the men's tag. I don't know. I'm very curious to hear your guys' thoughts on the status of the Bloodline winning the tag team titles. What are your thoughts on DIY? Are they going to win it back in a rematch again? I'm assuming they'll get a rematch just because it makes sense storyline wise. What match are you guys looking forward to the most when it comes to SummerSlam? And of course, Bloodline rules. How do we think it's going to play out? I think we all can agree there's going to be a huge interference from Jacob, Tama Tonga, Tangaloa, and I think on the other side, Randy and Kevin Owens might not appear, but that leaves the door open for guys like Jimmy, guys like Roman Reigns, maybe Jey Uso. I don't know. I'm looking real forward to it. I think this SummerSlam has a lot of potential to be one of the better SummerSlams in recent memory. Obviously, 2022 was good, 2023 was good. This one might be the best one of the Triple H regime. With that being said, again, thank you guys for joining me on this quick little update regarding DIY, regarding the Tag Team Championships. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more content around pro wrestling as well as the J Area podcast. And with that being said, I will see you guys in the next one.